Heisenberg told me his secret, and then he said something that still cannot be explained. This man, my student, had made one of the most extraordinary discoveries in the history of science. He proved that certainty itself is impossible. At the deepest level of reality, you can never know everything. The universe will not allow it. And then, one night in occupied Copenhagen, he became the living proof of his own discovery. He told me something in a park, in the dark, with German soldiers all around us. And after 80 years, no one, not historians, not physicists, not even the two of us who were there, has been able to determine what he meant. The man who proved that certainty does not exist became the greatest mystery in the history of physics. And I was the only witness. My name is Niels Bohr. This is that story. But to understand what he told me that night, you must first understand what we built together and what he discovered that changed everything. I first met Werner Heisenberg in 1922. He was 20 years old. I was 36. He came to one of my lectures in Göttingen, and afterwards, he stood up and challenged one of my calculations in front of the entire audience. He was right. I was wrong. And I knew immediately that this boy was going to change physics forever. I invited him to Copenhagen. He came in 1924, and for the next several years, he practically lived at my institute. We walked together every day along the harbor, through the parks, past the old churches. We argued about physics for hours, sometimes until 2 or 3 in the morning. My wife Margrethe would bring us coffee and tell us to go to sleep. We never listened. He was like a son to me. I do not say that lightly. I had 6 sons of my own. But Werner had a quality that I had never seen in any young physicist. His mind did not move the way other minds moved. Most physicists build arguments step by step, brick by brick. Werner would leap. He would arrive at an answer before he knew how he had gotten there, and then spend weeks building the staircase backwards so the rest of us could follow. We fought constantly about physics, about interpretation, about what it all meant. There were nights when our arguments nearly reduced him to tears. I pushed him. He pushed back. And out of that friction came something that neither of us could have created alone. The foundations of quantum mechanics were built in those arguments, in those walks, in those nights when Margrethe gave up and went to bed, and we were still pacing the room at 3 in the morning. 2 minds trying to understand a universe that refused to be understood. In 1925, at the age of 23, he created matrix mechanics, the mathematical foundation of an entirely new physics. But that was not what made him immortal. In 1927, he discovered something that shook the foundations of reality itself. He called it the uncertainty principle. The idea is simple to state, but devastating in its implications. You cannot simultaneously know both the position and the momentum of a particle. The more precisely you measure one, the more the other slips away. This is not a limitation of our instruments. It is not a problem that better technology will solve. It is a law of the universe. Reality itself refuses to be fully known. Before Werner, physicists believed that if you were clever enough and your instruments were precise enough, you could know everything about a system. Every position, every velocity, every future state. The universe was a clock, and if you could read the gears, you could predict everything. Werner proved that the clock does not exist, that at the deepest level, the universe is not a machine. It is a cloud of possibilities, and no measurement, no matter how perfect, can collapse that cloud entirely. There will always be something left unknown. Think about what that means. The man sitting across from me in Copenhagen had proved that the universe has a built-in limit on certainty, that there are things that cannot be known, not because we are not clever enough, but because knowing them is forbidden by the structure of reality. I am telling you this so you understand what happened next, because the man who proved that certainty is impossible was about to walk into my home and say something so uncertain that it would haunt both of us for the rest of our lives. I won the Nobel Prize in 1922. He won his in 1932. We were not just colleagues. We were partners in the deepest revolution physics had ever seen. And then Adolf Hitler came to power. Jewish physicists were expelled from their universities. Einstein fled. Max Born fled. Dozens of brilliant minds scattered across the world. And Werner stayed. He told me he was staying to protect German physics from the inside. I understood his reasoning. I did not agree with it. What I did not know was how much staying would change him. In 1939, nuclear fission was discovered. And by 1941, Werner was leading Germany's uranium research program. His team had achieved the first evidence of neutron multiplication in a reactor. A chain reaction was no longer theoretical. And he knew, as I knew, what that meant. Denmark had been occupied since April of 1940. My mother was Jewish. I was being watched. And then Werner came to Copenhagen. And what happened next is the reason I am telling you this story. He arrived on September 15th, 1941. He visited me 3 times. The first visit was pleasant. For a moment it felt like the old days. But at a conference between our meetings, he expressed his conviction that Germany would win the war. My colleagues were appalled. Then came the second visit, the one that changed everything. We went outside, into the park. It was a September evening. The air was cool. We walked side by side the way we had walked 1,000 times before. But this time, he had come to tell me something. I could feel it in the way he moved. His shoulders were tight. His voice was lower than I had ever heard it. He began carefully. He said that physicists had a responsibility to consider what their work might lead to. That work was being done in Germany on the military applications of uranium. I said nothing. I waited, because I knew he had not come all this way, through occupied territory, with the Gestapo watching both of us, to talk about responsibility in the abstract. And then he said something that I understood as a declaration, that under his leadership, everything was being done to develop these weapons, that he was familiar with all the details, that this work could change the course of the war. I stopped walking. The man who had proved that you cannot know everything was now telling me something, and I could not determine what he meant. Was he confessing, warning me, threatening me, asking for absolution, boasting, pleading? His own principle was staring me in the face. The more I tried to measure his words, the more his intention slipped away, just like a particle in the quantum world. I could hear the position, the words themselves, but the momentum, the direction, the purpose behind them was impossible to pin down. The more precisely I listened, the less I understood. I looked at him, and I did not know if he was building the most destructive weapon in history for Hitler, or trying to stop it from being built. Whether he had come to recruit me or to warn me. Whether the man I loved like a son had become a monster, or whether he was the bravest man I had ever known, risking execution to whisper the truth to his old teacher. Or was he? That is the question that has haunted me. Perhaps he was trying to tell me the opposite of what I heard. Perhaps the words he chose were not the words he meant, because there were things he could not say out loud. Not here, not now, not with German soldiers 100 meters away. But I could not take that risk. The conversation ended there. I did not trust myself to speak. He later claimed after Hiroshima that he was trying to suggest that physicists on both sides should agree not to build nuclear weapons, that he was reaching out through me to the Allies. But if that was his message, it was buried so deep in ambiguity that I, the man who knew him better than almost anyone alive, could not hear it. He said he had to speak in illusions because anything direct could have gotten him executed for treason. And perhaps that is true. Perhaps the father of uncertainty could only speak in uncertainty. Perhaps the man who proved that reality cannot be fully observed was incapable of being fully observed himself, and I was too frightened, too angry, too aware of what was at stake to hear what he was really saying. I will never know, and neither will you. That is not a failure of history. That is his principle, made flesh. We said goodbye, and we never saw each other the same way again. The man who had once been like my seventh son walked out of my house and back into the war. And what he had told me in that park, whatever it meant, followed me for the rest of my life. 2 years later, the Gestapo came for me. My wife Margrethe and I fled our home at the Carlsberg estate with almost nothing. A single bag, a bottle of heavy water, a sketch of the German reactor design. We crawled from a beach hut to a fishing boat in the darkness and crossed to Sweden. A week later, I was loaded into the bomb bay of a British Mosquito aircraft. The oxygen mask failed. I lost consciousness over the North Sea. When they opened the bomb bay in Scotland, they thought I was dead. I survived, and I went to Los Alamos under the name Nicholas Baker to help build the weapon that my former student had told me about in that park. I sometimes think about that. The student tells the teacher about the possibility of a weapon. The teacher is horrified. The teacher flees across an ocean, nearly dies in the bomb bay of an airplane, and then the teacher walks into a laboratory in the desert and helps build the very weapon he was horrified by. If Werner was trying to warn me, then my response to his warning was to build exactly what he warned me about. If he was trying to recruit me, then he succeeded beyond his wildest imagination, just not for the side he intended. And if he was trying to stop the weapon from being built, then I, his teacher, his mentor, the man he trusted more than anyone, became the instrument of his failure. The irony is not lost on me, and it never left me. After the war, Werner claimed he had deliberately slowed Germany's nuclear program. That Copenhagen visit was his attempt to reach out for peace. Many believed him, many did not. I wrote letters to him, many letters, trying to understand what he had meant. I sat at my desk, the same desk where we had once solved the riddle of complementarity together, and I wrote, draft after draft, pages of careful words trying to reconstruct a conversation that had destroyed a friendship of 19 years. Each time I wrote, I remembered his words differently. Each time I tried to pin down what he had said, the meaning shifted. It was as if the conversation itself obeyed his principle. The act of examining it changed what it was. I could remember the words or the feeling, but never both at the same time. I never sent a single one, because the truth is, I was not sure anymore. Not sure if he had been confessing, or warning, or boasting, or pleading. Not sure if I had heard what he said, or what I feared he would say. Not sure if the man in that park was the enemy, or the last friend I had left in the world. I sealed those letters. They were opened in 2002, 40 years after I died. 26 years after Werner died. They did not answer the question. There is a play written about that night. It is called Copenhagen. It won the Tony Award. It imagines our conversation in multiple versions. In each version, the truth is different. The playwright understood what the historians could not accept, that some conversations are like particles in quantum mechanics. The more precisely you try to observe them, the more the truth slips away. In the play, the character Werner says the following: "No one understands my trip to Copenhagen. Time and time again I have explained it. The more I have explained, the deeper the uncertainty has become. The uncertainty has only grown. And perhaps that is the final lesson of my student's greatest discovery. That certainty is an illusion, not just in physics, but in life. You can know the position or the momentum, but never both. In some things, even between two men who understood the universe better than almost anyone who has ever lived, will always remain uncertain. He taught me that the universe cannot be fully known. I never imagined that one day I would not be able to fully know him. Heisenberg told me his secret, and what he said that night still cannot be explained. The man who proved that certainty does not exist became the greatest unsolved mystery in the history of physics. His principle predicted it, and he became the proof. Werner Heisenberg, 1901 to 1976. Niels Bohr, 1885 to 1962. The sealed letters are open. The mystery remains.